Hey,
Hey,
I'm Sybil Erie,
and I'm Rose Nocturne,
and we're
the Ghost Maidens. We're a paranormal investigation duo that navigates across the frontier of reality, post-truth, and modern spiritualism.
where metaphysics and entertainment red pill simultaneously and merge into the phenomenon known as paranormal pop culture.
Being the true millennials we are, we made a podcast called Ghosts and...
In this podcast, we talk with academics, scientists, artists, paranormal investigators, and sometimes our own moms.
Oh God.
In this episode, we talk with Dell deChant, my previous professor who is the Associate Chair of the Department of Religious Studies at the University of South Florida. He is a Master Instructor and has served at USF since 1986. He is the author of 3 books, my personal favorite one being The Sacred Santa, Religious Dimensions of Consumer Culture, as well as over 40 articles in professional publications and chapters in 12 books. He specializes in religion and contemporary culture, and his current research focuses on religious, literary, and ecological expressions of agrarianism as they manifest in American popular culture.
For this first episode, we talk with him about the nature of reality and the fall of the West. This is Ghosts and...
Western reality.
It's me.
Hi!
Hi, it's great to see you.
You too! It's been a
Hello,
long time.
It hasn't been that long, but long enough, I guess.
How are you doing? I mean, what are you up to? I know you're still doing religious studies at USF.
Yeah, that's right. I think after you left, I became the chair of the department.
Any plans for after, or you don't know yet?
Well, I've been active for years in the agrarian community at USF. The main focus of my work right now, both my research as well as my own activism, is in the area of food sovereignty and agrarianism.
You've really inspired me. So I told Rose about the time I took your class about religion and pop culture. It ruined my life. Thank you very much.
You were already involved in popular culture, so you were aware of the field even before you stepped into the classroom.
Yeah, well, I studied art history. It's a long time ago. And then I got my master's degree in art in London afterwards. So that's what I've been up to. We are, of course, investigating paranormal pop culture. That's our research project.
Okay.
What's really popular on television right now? Ghost hunting, all of this crazy
Ghost
stuff.
tourism.
Yeah, ghost tourism. We're also looking at the bigger picture of pop culture and religion and magic and consumerism and how all of these things feed in together. And you're my guy for that.
I am. That would be me. That would be me. Yeah.
So we had some questions, and yeah, feel free to answer them however you want.
Well, there is one I would love to talk about. Is prophets and celebrities. Because we were watching a documentary about a young influencer, and he was giving a concert or whatever he does. His audience was full of, I think, 13-year-old girls. We were looking at this audience, and it really looked like worship, like 100% worship.
That's a common phenomena that has been around really forever, but certainly with the rise of a genuine popular culture and a middle class culture that's able to consume the artifacts of popular culture, the idea of a celebrity cult has been prominent. You begin seeing it in significant ways with the rise of modernization and the Industrial Revolution. But then it seems all through the 20th century, especially in the West, it has accelerated. It's picked up. And it's at a pitch right now. It's at a fever pitch. But that's what Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is this same story, the center of a celebrity cult. The phenomena associated with Trump, for example, is clearly reflective of elements of the sacred in a consumer culture. And I could go on about that. But what you're witnessing in that particular group or particular phenomenon you're seeing with the young women being attracted to this character, that's not new. We see it with Elvis Presley. We see it with the Beatles. It's the same sort of phenomena. And celebrity cults will have their own following, their own devotees that are sometimes divided by gender or organized by ethnicity, organized by age. For example, like the Trump cult, just by way of comparison, that's going to be middle-aged men, Caucasian, a very select demographic that are in love with this celebrity leader type, and they want to get as close to him and do as much as they possibly can in the context of this person. So you've got the right category when you identify this as a cult. Use cult in a derogatory sense either. That's just like a category that's the analysis of this sort of phenomena.
Well, how do you think social media is like, is it just amplifying it?
That the jury's out on that. I still have trouble getting a grip on exactly what's going on with social media. There certainly is an element of social media that allows for the amplification of certain cultural phenomena. But how exactly that works, I'm still not sure, because what happens is once you have the amplification of it, then you also have the diminution of it, or the attacks that come out on it. Social media is such a free-for-all that you can at once, promote an idea or a concept, like an influencer, right?
Yeah.
You promote it, you use your social media platform to get the word out to a lot of people, but then at the same time you also generate opposition. This is my take on it, and I'm not studying, I'm not researching social media, I'm just observing it in terms of the way it seems to work in culture, is that it creates polarities. It creates the fandoms, and then not just people that are indifferent, but people that are actively opposed to the fandoms. And that depends on the scale of the social media leader or icon or messiah type figure. Depending on the reach and the range of this person's celebrity, correspondingly, there'll be equivalent opposition, or at least significant opposition that'll come out. And the way in which that, quite frankly, distorts reality is quite interesting to me, but I don't have a handle on it just yet.
Could you say that these people who are opposed to the icon, they're like just as much a part of the movement?
Exactly. You got it. That's a very good observation, Rose. We tend to think of movements, whether they're religious or political or economic, in terms of the followers. And this is where social media is interesting. The phenomena itself also necessarily includes the opposition. This seems characteristic of social media, that you get, the fandoms. But in addition to the fandoms, especially on social media, then you have the antagonists, the opposition.
Yeah, exactly.
The people that not just dismiss it, but actually will take pains to attack it or critique it. And then once you reveal yourself to be within one of the fandoms, then you'll get a lot of negative stuff coming at you from other people that are in the network. And again,
the haters.
The haters, right. But you're right on the mark to see that you have the positive influencers, but then you also have this polarity that comes along with it too, which are the people that are opposed to it and will dismiss it and be cynical about it, and even, as you said, hate it.
But would you say that this is a new development? If you would say like this iconization of the celebrities, okay, we can compare it to religion on itself. Is this a new development, or is this why you would not call it a religion?
The approach that I use to studying popular culture is a functionalist approach. So you look for elements in culture that fill the categories of religion. Are there myths involved? Are there ritual involved? Is there a comprehensive understanding of reality that's presented? Are there answers to questions of ultimate concern? All of those elements come into play. Is there a discernible community that's based on this understanding of the ultimate power of the world? Once you see something like that, then you're moving in the direction of being able to analyze it as a religion, or at least within the traditional categories of religious analysis. And so much that goes on in popular culture, especially celebrity culture and celebrity cult type activities, it easily fits into that category. I was working on an article about Donald Trump and the American sacred. Once you see what's going on around the Trump phenomena, you see something that is stunningly, remarkably consistent with what religion is. But traditional religion has faded in the West as a motivating force. And so we have to look elsewhere for the types of cultural features that historically have been embodied by religion. They just are not any longer by traditional religion. So it's other things. It's politics, it's sports, it's media, it's celebrity. Those become the functional religions of this culture.
Would you say that we were maybe even more religious?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
If you give Rose my book, that outlines kind of like the categories that I use in the analysis of culture and I deploy it in terms of the American economic system, and then specifically the Santa Claus story at Christmas time.
Well, we love to watch bad Christmas movies, and we've picked up on a great and nightmarish trend, especially in Netflix. So we always notice that all the protagonists or main characters are used to work in advertising. They have some inner turmoil that they must return back to their roots and forget about their capitalist lifestyle. And it's just weird because it also revolves around Christmas and like the pressures of Christmas and like buying and
it's like consumerism, traditionalism.
Yeah.
Like the hero is a marketing workaholic. Love is shared by presents. It's really, really weird.
Right.
Every movie.
So, are angels and demons the same thing?
Well, there's ways in which you can interpret angels and demons. There's a way of interpreting demons as fallen angels.
Yeah.
They once were part of the good guys, and now they, for one reason or another, become part of the bad guys. Satan, for example, is often characterized as a fallen angel. I mean, he is classically a fallen angel who rebelled against God, and now he works against God. And so the angels that are still hanging around, Gabriel and Michael and Israfel, that whole collection of deities, whole collection of angels, are serving as the forces of good. And you have the evil demons that then are working against the forces of good, and we're the battlefield. You know, human beings and the human culture is the battlefield between these forces of good and evil. But yeah, they're I guess you'd say they're in the same family.
Yeah, we have quite a little obsession with the sacred and the profane.
Good. Yeah, well, they're part of that story. They're part of the classical dichotomy of Western culture and Western religion.
Yeah, why are things so dichotomy still? I mean, I think they're graying a bit, but no one has any room for nuance.
Right.
Or confusion.
Yeah.
I think that's my biggest frustration right now at the moment, that no one is allowing confusion to exist.
Agreed. Yeah, there's no room for irony, is there?
Yeah.
We're in a post ironic culture.
And that's no fun.
Well, no, you're right. You're right. It is no fun. It's also prone to exacerbating existing cultural tensions, leading to civil discord, even violence, because we don't recognize the shades of gray, and we don't recognize the points at which seeming oppositions can be melded together in creative and harmonious ways. We're in perilous times because of that.
What is your professional, personal opinion on the whole cancel culture and the pandemic and stuff? I've never seen anything like that before, so I was just wondering what your opinion on that is.
What exactly do you mean that you haven't seen before?
This liberal way, but it's still like a sort of like thought controlling kind of mechanism. Like you can't use these certain words for this certain thing. It's in opposition to right wing, but then it's also equally as
like an extreme moralization into like being on the right side.
Yeah,
the
always
good thing.
The good side of something.
I got you now. It's like Antifa, for example.
Yeah.
In opposition to white nationalism.
And like QAnon and all of this stuff.
I think that it's more pronounced, and I may be wrong about this, I can't say for sure, but I think it's more pronounced on the right than it is on the left. But it certainly is present more on the left than it has been, where the left historically and traditionally has worked towards pluralism and diversity and harmonization and trying to bring people together. That tends to be the mode of the left. In the West, at least in recent times. But now we're starting to see this more kind of radical, harsh pushback on the part of the left against the right. And I think it's because of the rise of fascistic tendencies on the right. If you look back at maybe 50 years ago, you had the right and the left, then you had liberals and conservatives even then. But there was broad common ground between the two. And there was a tendency to kind of marginalize and dismiss the radicals on both ends, radical left and the radical right. When I was growing up, the more radical of the two sides were the radical left. You had the Weather Underground, you had the yippies, you had various acts of violence that were being committed by leftist organizations. But that modified as we moved into the 70s, into the 80s, and we kind of had this broad equilibrium. Now, recently, in recent times, last 20 years or so, last 2 decades of the 21st century, you've seen a much more significant rise of right-wing violence, the rise of white nationalism. The Klan is back in business again, the kind of a white nationalist populism, which again, Trump tapped into. I mean, that's Trump base. And the left now is kind of resurgent in terms of its more aggressive, more publicly radical positioning, in part, I think, in response to the right, and also because we've kind of lost the middle ground. We've lost the middle ground where groups can come together and talk and have maybe very intense disagreements, but still walk away seeing that we're part of a broader common culture.
Because this is the thing with art, giving your own radicalized opinion on it. There's no more nuance or room for middle ground. So that's why I was just kind of...
Yeah, but I think especially in art, something new for what I'm used to is going on, where art seems to have a function in society. My art school, everyone seems to agree that with art, you are supposed to change the world in a way that you find better.
Politicizing.
Exactly. And I think there's more ways art can be made for different reasons. I think this is also a reaction to extreme right, but it just seems so...
Making safe spaces, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but it seems so conflicting. It seems so, by doing the one thing, by trying to be more inclusive, more diverse, by defining all these things, all these little boxes, by saying there are boxes, there are differences, and they look like this, it kind of seems like it has the opposite effect.
Yeah, it does. What's happening around the world, but especially noticeable in the West, is that the plausibility structure, the sacred legitimation, a term that Sybil would have run across in my course, is that that's breaking down. That there is no broad general consensus about reality.
Yeah.
No.
There are, as you said, the little boxes, the little circles. And those circles, it seems, are becoming ever more antagonistic to one another.
Yes.
So that's what happens when culture systems come to an end.
Yeah. And do you think that this is why everyone is becoming more religious or magical thinking or like escaping into some sort of fantasy now?
So you're saying that our cultural system is coming to an end?
We won't know till it's over, you know. we just won't know. But it does appear that the form of socialization, sacred legitimation, the plausibility structure, what Marx called the base, is coming apart. And as the base comes apart, then again, not to be too much of a Marxist, but as the base comes apart, the structure of society itself fails, right? And if you think of it as a building, you know, if the foundation comes apart, then the roof falls in.
But do you think that capitalism is falling apart? Because it seems like capitalism is a beautiful replacement for religion in the West. Like it seems to behave in that way.
Yeah, read my book. You know, read the Sacred Santa, the religious dimensions of consumer culture. That from the 1950s on, Western capitalism has been driven by consumerism, literally the commodification of reality. And that's been going on since the 50s and escalating, continuing to accelerate. Well, right now, over the last few years, last decade at least, we've seen that type of capitalism start to come apart. It becomes more difficult to consume at the rate that we have been consuming. And the pandemic that we're in right now just beat the living hell out of consumer capitalism. I mean, you think about all the things that have been commodified within our culture and how hard it is to do those things. I mean, we even reached the point where we commodified sporting events, we commodified relationships, we commodified media culture in general, that you just can't listen to music. You have to buy music. You have to buy the apps. You have to buy the material that allows you to consume even abstract things like art or music, entertainment. All that stuff is just coming apart right now very dramatically, which signals, as I'm reading it, it signals not a challenge in the superstructure. It signals a challenge in the base. It signals a challenge in the very basis of reality itself. That's why we can't agree on things.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we reach an impasse and there's no broad general consensus about reality. What about science? Science is one of the building blocks of this contemporary culture, part of the building blocks of the modern world. And science increasingly is just dismissed. The scientists say this is what we have to do. Climate change is a great example. The resistance to vaccination is another good example. The dismissal of traditional economic systems and beliefs just rejected out of hand. All of these are symptoms of a disintegration of the base. So is capitalism done? This type of capitalism may be done.
Also, there's something going on with capitalism and the changing currency on the internet in the virtual space. It almost seems like your eyeballs watching something, that is what you pay with.
Right. But those eyeballs, and again, you know more about the social media world than I do, but those eyeballs are monetized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, the more viewers you get, then you're able to turn that into some sort of transaction, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, I'm an influencer.
Not me, Instagram, yeah.
But that we have I have 1 million people that watch me. Then that platform that I have becomes monetized in some way that I benefit from it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
right?
Well, they do, not really so much us, but can.
No,
yeah.
well, yeah, but you could. I mean,
Yeah.
anybody could. That's another thing. There's this there's this kind of rush or desire on the part of many people to be that person that's able to get all the views and then in some way profit from it, or at least get recognition from it that's rewarding and beneficial to them. So I'd say that's part of the modification of the model, but it doesn't necessarily change the basis of the model itself.
Yeah.
It's still the idea, it's still a consumer-based model.
We wanted to talk to you about perceptions about death in the West. We're trying to make a picture of how people view the afterlife in this time. We're finding that through technology, people think they can achieve some sort of afterlife of living forever, whether that's through data or being able to find a ghost using the right technology. But then I also have this counter, people becoming more aware of the environment and veganism and stuff, that there's also bigger concern with body death. It's just this weird back and forth between being a body and then being a virtual body that continues to live on. There's just this weird thing, and I think maybe in America, of also not really thinking about your death in a body way. It's actually more morbid to think about your death than to not think about your death.
I think there's something going on with the virtual being a more and more realistic part of our lives. And there's something going on with our body experience, being more a mind all the time does something to how you look at your body and your mortality even.
Yeah.
There I see on popular culture, on Netflix, for example, and there's this positivity thing, everything is supposed to be good, positive, improving, and the best of itself. And it seems like in that way of thinking, you're not supposed to think about your death at all, not even your body. And then there's this other side where it almost seems gothic, like a neo-gothic, people are only thinking about their death, also in an aesthetic way. I think this is because of the internet, because we don't have to be a body all the time. We can decide whether or not we want to believe in mortality.
Believing in mortality, yeah.
There's no question to my mind that the inhabitant of the physical world is declining, that we're not here. We're not in the physical world.
Yeah.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, psychically. Mm-hmm. Now, the roots of that, again, can go back to the 50s, kind of the rise of postmodern culture and the rise of a visual culture in which reality begins to become what you're seeing visually, what you're experiencing, if not just seeing, but visually experiencing the world through, first of all, through film, and then TV, and now increasingly the internet and social media and tools that allow you to enter into this artificial virtual world, like these new mask type instruments that are available where you put them over your eyes and then you enter into this magical world, this artificial world. Well, those are growing in popularity too, it appears. I mean, I at least am seeing advertisements of them increasingly. And then like the whole gaming culture too, in which you become immersed in this artificial world, and that world becomes more real to you than the actual physical world. Like I'm having contact with you right now virtually. We're not really in physical contact with us. Well, that changes my understanding of reality, maybe just a little bit.
Right.
But if I'm constantly being exposed to this, your reality is this experiencing coming through the screen. And then the next thing I do is watch a TV show, or I switch to some YouTube social media type of video screen. I'm not seeing human beings. I'm not relating to human beings. I'm not relating to the natural world. I'm not engaged in the physical world the way our ancestors were, the way I grew up, for example. You guys have been exposed to this kind of world much more so than I have.
Yeah, we're all losing our minds now.
A larger part of our lives.
Yes. The question is, what's real?
Yeah.
What's reality? Well,
exactly.
These types of experiences, which tend to be isolating as opposed to socializing, types of reality take on greater and greater meaning and meaningfulness to individuals in the culture, while at the same time atomizing, meaning separating us into our own individual experiences, which are isolated from the experiences of groups.
So what do you think that will be the consequences of this in terms of the part of us that's religious? How is this individual realization? You have to help me with the difficult words.
Individual realization.
And at the same time, the fading boundaries of the physical reality. What is your prediction?
The jury's still out. No, I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's certainly that we're moving in a direction which is separating us, and really quickly it appears, that's separating us from traditional human experiences of the world and traditional human experiences of one another and traditional human experiences of community. That's happening. It's happening very, very fast. It has been going on, clearly to my mind, since the 50s with the rise of television culture, but it's been continuing on. And Neil Postman, refers to it as a post-textual age. We're beyond the world of text. We still are inundated with language, words that we read, and we certainly are literate enough. But the ability, for example, to read a sustained text, to actually read.
It's hard.
Yeah. How many books have you read?
Like, I'm chewing through 2. It's hard.
Yeah, but over the last 3 or 4 years, how many have you read? A lot?
Not too many.
My hunch is you guys are exceptions. You're obviously academics. You've been involved in professional life that requires reading and reflection, but that's the exception to the rule. Most people can't get through a book.
No, it's hard. Yeah,
and that has not always been true. Even I spent my whole life reading books. I mean, that's what I do. It's hard for me now. It's just harder for me. So even someone that's used to doing it, who spent a lifetime and a career that's based on being able to consume text, even I have trouble doing it. And I'm not alone. My colleagues say exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So where's that moving? Where's that going? It appears to be moving in the direction of further divorcing us from the material physical world and from meaningful interaction with that world, including other human beings in that world, in the physical space.
But don't you think that meaningful interaction will just evolve into something else?
Well, it is. Yeah, you're right. The meaningful action is now no longer with the material physical world, or with other human beings in the physical world. I would much prefer, frankly, to be sitting around a cafe chatting with you right now in person, rather than this, right? But because I'm not able to do that, because we're not able to do that right now, this becomes meaningful. My word on the subject is reality as we've known it is changing. A kind of a reality that had existed since the 19th century, but especially since the middle part of the 20th century, that world is rapidly changing. All bets are off. And what things are going to look like in another 10 years is an open question.
Rose calls it the theater of truth.
Yeah, well said. Well said. But what's in the theater? What's playing in the theater?
Well, the theater right now is very quickly also shifting to a more virtual space, which is a very, very new thing in the theater, because theater used to be here and now. That's the very definition of theater.
And life was here and now. I mean,
Yeah.
all of life was here and now. So, one interesting question you'd have is, well, when did the shift occur, and in what generations did the shift occur, so that we moved from reality being the physical material world to reality, or the theater of truth, being the virtual world? When did that happen? Granted, it certainly has not been finalized, but we're at the point where, for increasingly large numbers of people, the virtual world becomes the world of reality, the world of truth. And what's going on in the physical world is not the truth, but is in some way diminished or depreciated,
or a variation, or a perspective on all these truths can be there at the same time.
Yes.
I think it's an interesting challenge for us, to see if we can simulate this feeling of being a physical body here and now, in a poetic translation into the virtual, basically, to simulate being a present body in a virtual way,
which is a ghost, basically.
I love that. Yeah, see, that's a good point. A physical being, but in a virtual sense. Is that what you said, Rose?
To have this physical experience while you're online, basically.
And that's a ghost.
I'd say it's like seeing a ghost.
Yeah, that's
it's like having a physical experience of something that's not physically there.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah,
and this whole ritualistic, like traditions of theater. I think
love it. So are you doing a play? Are you doing some drama?
We're experimenting with.
We do podcasts. We do reviews on like movies, stuff like that. We make our own like sort of paranormal theater, and then Rose is also writing music, curses,
magic.
We play ghost hunting video games while we stream them.
We summon ghosts.
We summon them. Yeah. Ouija board's quite boring.
I'd say we summon the spirits all the time.
Yeah, as artists, I think you are using the same terminology that you use in the paranormal, like channeling, summoning, manifesting.
Yes, right.
Same thing.
No question about it. I agree. I agree with that, reading that, understanding. I'm thinking that if you do theater around that, you do performance around that, to dramatize the contrast, or to dramatize the changing reality, the changing basis of reality. If you had a character who was committed to the material physical world as the only reality, we're able to contrast that character, that being, with persons that had a commitment to the virtual world. And we're able to draw a contrast to show the difference between their experience and their being, would be extremely edifying, would be instructive to others, to kind of deploy art and its creative, vastness, to portray this shift that's going on in culture, and how the person is committed to the material physical work, which would be me, but how that person's world is very narrow and very limited, and the person that's committed to the virtual world is very rich and diverse, and allows room for incredible expression that the person in the material physical world just doesn't have. I'm interested in where you're going, and your reflection on that, especially in the creative sense, where I see the virtual world creating incredible opportunities for experience.
But it's still never more than a reflection on our physical experiences.
Right now, because we still have a memory of the physical world, and my memory of the physical world and life in the physical world is deeper and certainly longer standing than that of my students. I asked the students, I don't think I did in your class, but I asked the students in the agrarian course and the environmental course to tell me about their relationship with the natural world and growing up, and any memories from their past. And almost all of them will say in that they haven't had very much experience in the natural world. Every so often you'll get one that, was a hunter or a fisher person, or liked going camping with their parents. But even those will say, but then I got to high school And then the contacts all stopped. And their contact then increasingly becomes one that they relate to in a virtual thing. They'll start telling me about programs that they saw, or a great video that they watched, or a professor that took them on a field trip. But that becomes just this isolated, memorable event, this field trip. And then it's back to the regular world of the virtual screens. And this continues to be of interest to, obviously, you. It continues to be of interest to me. But I also recognize that as the generations proceed, unless there's some sort of, and this is another story, some sort of catastrophe, that increasingly that virtual world is going to become the actual world. As I said, cease to be meaningful, but it'll cease even to be real.
Or more the dream world, like the physical world becomes the dream world.
Yes, it does. Exactly right. Here's a thought. What happens when the power collapses? What happens when the internet goes down? What happens when the systems begin to fail? And if it is true that the base is starting to come apart, then it means the superstructure is starting to come apart too. And as the superstructure comes apart, then we'll reach a point where the cyber systems, the technology that is necessary for us to experience the virtual world, where that won't work anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe we would all become poets.
I'd love that.
Because we need our imagination to run free and not be stopped by borders.
Yeah. Oh, and not be confined by the screens too.
Yeah.
You know, imagine if we can break free of the screens and still have that kind of experience. How about that?
All right.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Have a great rest of your day.
I will. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye now.
Goodbye.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Patreon supporters.
Patreon supporters who?
Our Patreon supporters, whom without their help we would not be able to make any of this.
Our podcast is available for Patreon members only. You can find a link in our Instagram bio to become our supporter, or go to www.patreon.com/theghostmaidens. And for as little as $2 a month, you get access to our films, music, and exclusive content.
If you'd like to talk with us, get in touch by sending an email to theghostmaidens@gmail.com. And remember to look for truth, not proof.
Unless you're an actual scientist. Probably also a lawyer.
Or me to my boyfriend.
Or a doctor with a reputation to uphold. Or an astronomer.
All right.
Definitely an astronomer.